What type of fishing line do you prefer to use is the next question on my list. Well, again, it's fluorocarbon. Day in and day out, I think you're going to have more success with that line. Now, what's my go-to lure? Crankbait, spinnerbait, plastic worm? That's a really good question, and I've learned over the years not to have a go-to lure. Back in the day, particularly when I was tournament fishing, my go-to lure was always the plastic worm, okay? But I've learned over the years to try not to have a go-to lure because every day the situation, the environment changes, and the fish are, you know, one day wanting one thing and one day wanting the next. Now, if you said you can only have one fishing lure and that's it, you can never have another one, what would it be? Wow, I don't know. It would be a toss-up between a crankbait and a plastic worm, frankly. And I know, you know, I like to throw jigs too. I just caught yesterday out here on Lake of the Ozarks, I caught 4 bass in between 15 and 20 foot of water on some brush piles, and they went 14 pounds. They averaged 3.5 pounds a piece, and 3 of them came on a jig and plastic, and the other one came on a crankbait. Okay, so you got to really be versatile, in my opinion. I've caught a number of fish out here in the past couple of weeks, fishing drop shot techniques as well, and also wacky worm setups too. So the point is, you need to really learn to be versatile. If I had to choose today, it probably wouldn't be the plastic worm. I think the fishing whole thing has changed over the years. I would tend to go with crankbaits, and in the best case scenario, I would throw a crankbait till I found some fish, then I would slow down with something smaller, or I'm sorry, something you fish slower like a worm or a jig, and I would try to catch the bigger quality fish. But if I had to just say, I could only have one lure, I know many people would choose a jig. And that's because it's so versatile, and I really couldn't argue that. I mean, you can fish it in 1 foot of water, you can fish it in 40 foot of water. So I can't argue that point. But for me, because you can cover so much water faster, catch the aggressive fish quicker, I would probably take a crankbait. Do certain color and types of lures work better at different times of the year? And we've kind of covered that a little bit. I will tell you this about things like plastic worms, in my view. In a clear body of water, like for example Table Rock and Beaver Lake and even parts of Lake of the Ozarks, my feeling about lure color on things like plastics is that the cleaner and clearer and deeper the water that I can see, the more translucent colors that I want to fish. Bill Dance once said many years ago, any color of plastic worm is okay as long as it's blue. And I'll be honest, I day in and day out for years, that's what I bought into, and by golly, I still think that's a good choice. But at the end of the day, other colors have come along since then that also help match the forage. You know, watermelon, of course, black is a good all-around color as well. But the cleaner and clearer and deeper the water that I can see, the more translucent blues, reds, and natural colors that I'm going to want to fish, like the green pumpkin would be a good example also. I throw crankbaits most of the time that I fish, but 95% of the fish I catch on plastics and jigs. What's the key to crankbaits? You know, there are a couple of keys to crankbaits. Number one is you got to fish the lure at the right depth. I mean, these fish can be from 1 foot of water to 40 foot of water. And finding the depth of the majority of the fish that you're trying to catch, that's the number one thing you can do every time you go fishing. It's not lure color. I want to focus on the depth of those fish. Once I know the depth, whether they're 5 feet, 10 feet, or 20 feet, how deep are they, then I can take a lure choice that covers that depth and does it at different speeds, from slow to fast, until I find out exactly what it is those fish are looking for on that particular day. So you're not throwing those lures at the right depth more times than not. Secondarily is always bump your crankbait off of something, whether it's a log, whether it's a brush pile, whether it's a rock or a rock pile, off the bottom. Try to always bump the lure off of something, because more times than not, when that lure ricochets off of something, whether it's the bottom, a stump, or whatever it is, that's when that strike is going to take place. I watch people fish with me once in a while, and they're throwing crankbaits, and they're always afraid of getting hung up. No, the answer is you throw it up there past that brush pile, or you throw it up there past that log and that rock, and you crank that thing in, and you purposely make it hit that rock and ricochet off, so that your lure stays in the strike zone. Now, the third thing is this. I watch people cast to the bank, reel back to the boat. Cast to the bank, reel back to the boat. Or stand on the bank and throw out in deep water and crank it back to them. Well, look, if that fish that you're trying to catch is in, say, 7 foot of water or 8 foot of water, you throw to the bank and you bring it back to you, or you're in a boat and, and you're cranking it down, that lure is only in that 7, 8 foot depth momentarily. It's going from 1 foot down to 7 or 8 and right back to the boat. And so it's only in the strike zone a very short period of time. You need to cast more parallel to the bank, or at least 45-degree angle to the bank, whether you're fishing from shore or whether you're fishing from a boat. Throw it at a 45-degree angle, so when that lure comes back to you, it's in that strike zone way longer than it is when you're simply casting parallel or perpendicular to the bank. And I watch people do that all the time. So throw your crankbait at a 45-degree angle, so you're covering much more water that has the potential of producing a fish, versus throwing it perpendicular so that when it comes through the strike zone, it passes so fast that you have virtually no chance of catching a fish. That'll keep your lure, that crankbait, in the strike zone a whole lot longer.